Morning, future third graders. Today we are learning about Atlanta and golden apples. Let's go ahead and get started. Long ago, in a peaceful little corner of Greece, there lived a king and queen who loved each other very much. Although their kingdom was not large or wealthy, they and all their people lived very happily. This king and queen had a daughter, a princess who was intelligent, beautiful, and a skilled huntress. She also happened to be the fastest runner in the world. Her name was Atlanta. So if you have your character chart in front of you, you can go ahead and add Atlanta to your list so we can find out more about her. Oh, I think she's growing up. When she reached a certain age, Atlanta's parents told her, one day you will become queen, and ruling this land is too big of a job for one person to do alone. It is time for you to get married. To their surprise, Atlanta replied, I can ask wise men or women to help me run the country. As for a husband, perhaps I shall have one someday, but for now there is no one whom I wish to marry. The queen asked, what about those fine young men who come around asking to marry you? Surely one of those. They care nothing for me, mother, Atlanta replied. They only want to marry me in order to become king, and I won't. But the king and queen insisted. Finally, Princess Atlanta said, very well, I shall marry the first unmarried man who can defeat me in a foot race. Oh, what? Her parents exclaimed. They tried to talk her out of the idea, but they could not. So at last they agreed to her terms and sent word throughout the land. Foot race. Ooh, somebody has to beat her in a foot race. Looks like she's beating them, looking at the pictures. As you might imagine, many young men came to race against the princess, hoping to marry her. She easily defeated every single one. What did the text say for why all the men wanted to marry her? Because they wanted to what? They wanted to become king. One day, after winning yet another race, she just kept running past the finish line for the sheer delight of it. She did not know that looking down from Mount Olympus that day was the goddess of love, Aphrodite. The goddess thought, she is making a joke of love. I cannot allow this to go on. So here's Aphrodite on top of Mount Olympus. Now, at that same moment, a young man was walking along the same road upon which Atlanta was now running. The young man was a brave adventurer named Hippomenes. He was just returning from a long sea voyage, so he knew nothing of the princess's challenge. As Hippomenes walked along, he glanced ahead and saw the most beautiful young woman he had ever laid eyes on running his way. It was Atlanta, of course. And as Hippomenes was looking at her, the goddess Aphrodite was looking at her. Turning to her son, Eros, Aphrodite said, go shoot an invisible arrow of love into Hippomenes' heart so that he will fall in love with her. So Eros did as he was told. There's Aphrodite's son shooting an arrow of love into Hippomenes. Oh, looks like they fell in love. The goddess presented Hippomenes with 3 apples made of the purest gold that shone almost as brightly as the sun. When Atlanta sees this apple, she will not be able to resist picking them up, Aphrodite said. Here is what you must do. The next day, Hippomenes challenged Atlanta to a race. Inside his rather loose-fitting clothes, he had hidden the 3 golden apples. Before the race, he told Atlanta, Your Highness, I want you to know why I am racing against you. Atlanta answered, in order to marry a princess and become king someday. To her shock, he replied, no, in order to marry the woman I love, she just happens to be a princess. Then he walked to the starting line while Atlanta thought, there's something different about this one. Still, she took her place next to him. A moment later, the race was on. Do you think that he really is in love with her, or is it the Aphrodite that turned him into loving her? Looks like her parents are very pleased, though. Oh, she got distracted. Atlanta began to pull ahead almost at once, but Hippomenes drew one of the apples from inside his clothing and tossed it ahead of her a little off to the side. The moment Atlanta saw the apple, she had to have it. She turned and went after it. As she picked it up, she saw Hippomenes ahead of her, and losing no more time, she took off like a deer. Soon Hippomenes heard her footsteps closing in behind him. Drawing out apple number 2, he held it up so she would see it and tossed it back over his shoulder. She turned right around and ran back to get it while Hippomenes ran on. Grabbing the second apple, she saw Hippomenes halfway to the finish line. This time, Atlanta took off, running after him like a speeding cheetah dashing across the gracelands. And there's apple number 3. Soon Hippomenes could hear her rapid footsteps getting closer, and he took out apple number 3 and threw it into the nearby field of tall grass. Of course, Atlanta went after it, hunting through the grass for the golden fruit while Hippomenes kept running. This one, too, she held in the palm of her hand as she returned to the race. In all of Atlanta's life, she had never run as she had ran then. Her feet seemed not to touch the ground. Faster and faster she moved, and closer to Hippomenes she came. He told himself, "Don't look back or you might lose a step." Now she was only 3 steps behind him, now 2 steps, now just 1. And then she thought to herself, would it be so terrible if I did marry him? And as she thought that, Hippomenes gained a step and crossed the finish line before her. Ooh, she's getting married. What happened after that? Well, I'm glad to say that Atlanta kept her word and married Hippomenes, and I am even gladder to say that she had been right. There was something different about him, and soon she loved him as much as he loved her. Hippomenes never minded that Atlanta could outrun him. He was happy just to be the one running with her. So your question for today, your exit ticket, is why do you think Atlanta is not able to resist the golden apples? Why do you think she was not able to resist the golden apples?